Well, this is a perfect case of an album where you bring uncertain expectations in it and kind of meeting those expectations. Yeah, let's dive into this one. Will of the People by MUSE. So, MUSE is a UK rock group getting their start in the early 2000s. I mean, very late 90s, early 2000s. Really blowing down the doors with their second album of Origins of Symmetry. Showbiz was fine. The first album of theirs that I loved was their album that followed that up with Absolution in 2003. And then, of course, Black Holes and Revelations in 2006. I do feel like these three albums are really like top tier MUSE records. Like you really don't get any better than that. Which is a shame because, you know, they have 9 studio albums, including the one that we're talking about here. I feel like after Black Holes, they just kind of did a little bit of a dip. And I can't 100% fault them for that because I feel like what they were doing was this big experiment. You know, like they had moved themselves away from being that really powerful hard rock kind of expression like the Brit rock that we were getting within the mid 2000s, being led predominantly by Matt Bellamy on vocals, guitars, and keyboards, and like he's the trifecta, right? Like he's the triple threat in terms of the musical landscape. You know, he's got this amazing singing voice that ranges the different octaves. He can shred away on the guitar and also just pour his heart out on the piano. And then helping him out is the duo of Chris Wolstenholme. Oh man, I always trip over his last name. Chris is on the bass guitar and backing vocals, as well as Dominic Howard on drums. And so the three of them really are like this really core rock group from the UK. The one thing that you can always say about a MUSE album is that they have a clear idea of what the album wants to be and what the album's going to sound like, especially post Black Holes. And you know, they're trying different things, they're experimenting with different things, they're always doing something new and exciting. It might not necessarily work all the time, but at least they're trying something. And yeah, when we come to Will of the People, man, I mean, what do I want to say about this album? I feel like this is the first album of theirs that I think regresses in terms of sounds rather than progresses in some way. You know, like as much as I didn't necessarily connect with Simulation Theory, at least I could recognize that they were still progressing their sound. They were still trying different things. You know, they were incorporating this very 80s inflective sound to it, and they were doing something new. Will of the People doesn't really do that. I feel like Will of the People is a best of compilation album of pale comparisons of original songs that they have already done. You know, like each of the tracks that I'm hearing on this album, I'm like, well, this is just a rehash of Supermassive Black Holes or Absolution or Hysteria or The Resistance. You know, like it's all kind of like their greatest hits, but in a lesser, pale, or less exciting way. Like all the tracks here are fairly short. I don't mind that these tracks are smaller, but they're also smaller in terms of scope. Like not just in terms of runtime, but also scope. Like a lot of these tracks I feel are done way too soon. And I'm just kind of left wanting more and not necessarily in a good way. And there's only 10 tracks on this. So again, it provides enough flavor. I want to say enough variation, but there's not a whole lot of variations on this one. Like you definitely have tracks that are heavier, and there are a lot more heavier tracks on this. Like Won't Stand Down and Kill or Be Killed can almost be classified as like a metal track. I haven't heard MUSE be this heavy and this close to approaching metal, I think ever. I think this is like the heaviest that they've ever been. And you know what? I can get on top of that. I think like their style of music really lends their hand very, very well to this more metal approach. And there's still a number of like more ballady tracks on this one, like Ghosts, How Can I Move On, and Verona are much more mellow in approach. They're a lot more somber. I'm getting flavors of like Madness from, I think that was The Second Law. These tracks I can kind of take or leave. Like at least they still have a little bit of energy to them. You know, they've got like a very bigger synth-led lead within that case, and it provides an interesting track, if not completely unforgettable. But man, I still have to say, like, I think this album's biggest downfall is their reliance on other tracks that came before it. Like, I just feel like this is just retreading the old ground way too heavily. And that's found very much on the title track of Will of the People. Not only does it sound like a rehash of a lot of their other tracks, it also feels like Marilyn Manson's The Beautiful People. Like, it has that same cadence within it, but it also has that same driven root, that but yeah, as I mentioned, a lot of these tracks are basically just rehashes of old tracks like Compliance and Euphoria, feel right off of The Resistance, and especially using a lot more of like the Queen style of singing with a very fast-paced and punching aspects to them. And unfortunately, the album ends on a really dour and very unoriginal and almost very sloppy track of We Are Fucking Fucked that I'm not really a big fan of this style of track. Like, the whole concept of this album is something that they've done multiple times, specifically on Resistance and Drones. Like, this is very much, rise against the government, they don't know what they're doing, so take back the government. Putting that kind of aside, some more of the more environmental side of things, especially on We Are Fucking Fucked, like on The Second Law, like it's a very interesting sentiment, but at least within The Second Law, it was like, hey, things are getting messed up. We still have a chance to fix things, so let's go ahead and do so. Yeah, that last song is basically like, nope, we had our chance and we screwed it up, so well, I guess we're screwed. And I don't know, I think that's just very defeatist. I think that is counteractive to what you were trying to get across in the first place, and it's very reductive as well. It's basically like, oh well, nothing we can do, might as well make it worse, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, it's a very bad flavor. But I at least want to spend a little bit of time talking about my favorite track off of this album, which is You Make Me Feel Like It's Halloween. Love this track, love this track, love this track. I think it's a great addition to the Muse catalog. It's fun, it's quirky, it's cheesy as all get out. I love the organ sounds that are on this. It never takes itself completely seriously. Like, I don't know, it's just so fun. And this is something that I really enjoyed from Muse, from their earlier works, of it being fun. It was never so self-serious. It was always just this inflection of fun aspects to it, and they brought that back into the fold on this one, and I ended up loving it. This is a track that I feel like a lot of people will be playing at Halloween. Like, I would be shocked, absolutely flabbergasted, if this track doesn't make it on, the latest horror film that comes out on Halloween or subsequent Halloween themed movies. Like, this is the perfect soundtrack to that. I do feel as though it's a little on the short side, being at exactly 3 minutes, and I feel like they did that very much on purpose, but I don't know, I feel like it's gone before it even got started. And it's a shame. Like, they could have really, like, blossomed this up into something really, really fun, into, like, the 4 or 5, heck, even 6 minute, and I wouldn't have, said boo about it. So I guess in the end, this album is still a fun time, if a forgettable time. At least the energy is still high on all these tracks. I never feel bored on this album, which is a really big plus. Like, at no point am I ever like, I'm really, like, lost in the weeds on this part. But, yeah, this isn't one that I would immediately go to first within a Muse discography. So, yeah, I guess I'll say, in the end, The Will of the People by Muse is one that I would still stream. I think it would be very hard-pressed to say that this is a bad album on its own. It's only a less than stellar album when you compare it to the rest of the Muse discography, especially their first, 5 or 6 albums. So, yeah, that's what I've got for Will of the People. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And, yeah, that's all I've got. So, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.